Hey guys, Modzy here, back with another video. And today I'm going to be talking to you about my main Windows XP retro machine. In late 2016 I had built a really nice full water-cooled retro system that was meant to be my main retro gaming PC for Windows XP. It had a Pentium 4 Northwood, 6800 Ultra, nice Intel 478 motherboard, and some other bits and pieces as well. But I went to the extent of buying I wanted to build it in a modern case with a few bits and pieces of modern water cooling stuff. And I wanted to do a really unique build, full custom water cooling build in a Thermaltake View 27 case that has a really nice curved acrylic side window panel in it. But in early 2017 I realized when I was starting to grow my video card collection that I wanted to use the system as the main AGP test bench for all of the AGP cards that I was actually getting in for the collection. And I very quickly realized that that was going to be a problem, having a full liquid cooled system, including the liquid cooled video card, with these blocks. This is not the actual card that I used. This is just a 7800 GTX with the same blocks on it that I actually used on my 6800 Ultra, as you can kind of see there. And basically I stripped the system down, and it was a really sad thing to do because I spent probably 6 months putting it all together, and yeah, had to pull it apart because it was the only system that I had to test all my AGP cards. But here we are in mid-2018, and I realized that I haven't enjoyed this system anywhere near as much as what I did when I first built it with the water cooling and stuff. In fact, I very rarely use this system these days because it's so loud, especially with the stock reference cooler 6800 Ultra in it. Even the Zalman heatsink that I was using, the air cooler that I was using at the time, it was just too loud to sustain the overclock, and I just found myself not enjoying the system much anymore. So I had to think about it and realize that I wanted to redo the water cooling, but I wanted to do it in the Lian Li case that I have since bought and merged this system into. I realized that this system can fit some water cooling in it, but I was having a bit of trouble trying to work out what I wanted to do. So I absolutely love this Lian Li case. This thing is as light as a feather to lift up and use. This is a really lightweight case. If I don't accidentally bend the aluminium, there we go. But this case has a lot of room. It normally has a hard drive cage just here that you can slot hard drives into, but thankfully Lian Li designed this case with that screwed in rather than riveted in, so I can just remove it. Because I only have the one hard drive in this case that sits up here in a bay device up here rather than needing this rack, I've got all of this free space down here that does absolutely nothing for the rest of the aesthetics of the case. I have all the motherboard and stuff there, the power supply there. The power supply that I'm using has minimalistic kind of cabling. It's not modular, so I kind of have to be a bit smart with the cable management. But this area of the case here for all the cable management, there's nothing that you can really get to behind the tray. This beam that runs along here is pretty much flush up against the side panel, so it's really hard to tuck cables up into here without first routing them through here or this one cutout hole here. And everything here and here can actually be seen through the side window on the other side of the case. So there's nowhere to hide any cables in this case. So one of the things that I'm going to sort of try to tackle is customizing the power supply and hiding or removing some of the excess cables that I don't need for this build. It's the power supply that I have I bought specifically for this system. It's a 430 watt Seasonic power supply, perfect for running the hardware that I have in here. Yeah, so I'm not going to be cutting any holes or doing any modifying of this case specifically because thankfully it already has all of the features and all the bits and pieces that I want in it, which is good. But what I'm going to do is talk you through the main water cooling bits and pieces that are going to go into here and how I'm going to lay it out and stuff at the moment. So the plan is I'm actually using a SR2s from Hardware Labs. The ones that I have in particular are the multi-port version, so they actually have some multi-port connections on the end, which means you have a lot of options for mounting the fittings, which is really good in a build where you might be limited for space and the traditional front-facing ports might not be accessible, or they might hit things that are mounted in the bottom of the case or the top of the case or whatever it might be. You might have to go off the sides or the bottoms depending on what you're doing. And not only that, these radiators are hella thick, as you can see. That's thick with 2 C's, and these things are ideal for silent water cooling. In fact, I have two of these in my main system. I have a 280mm version of this, a white one along the front panel of my main case, and then along the top on the inside I have a 240mm version of these. But the secret sauce that makes these so good and perform so well is the fin count and the fin density on these radiators. And what that enables you to do is run very low RPM on your fans, because there's not a huge amount of restriction compared to, you know, radiators that have a very dense fin, a very high fin count. So my main system, for example, my 3770K and my Titan that I have are pretty much running at their overclocking limit at the moment, and I have all the fans running between 600 and 700 RPM, very low RPM, and this thing makes almost no noise, to the point where I can have it sitting here right next to me turned on, as you can see, and you can't hear it on the microphone because it is so quiet. So, what is the plan for this build? So the idea is, when I was thinking and looking at this case and trying to plan out how I wanted to do it, what I wanted to do, the biggest issue I ran into is the pump and reservoir location, because this case has 5 bay device slots in it, and I use all 5 of them already, which means I don't have room to fit any kind of like pump res combo or something in these bay devices without sacrificing 1 or even 2 devices out of here, which I don't really want to do. So then I was trying to shop around for pump res combos that I can kind of mount in here somewhere, and I was realizing that if I want to have the full use of the expansion cards to have like a big, big long AGP card or something like that, or one of the longer PCI cards that I've got in a lower down slot, I was very limited for the room that I could have behind the top cage here. So this is what I came up with. When I managed to pick up this radiator and I got it here and started doing some measurements about what I wanted to do, I realized that the radiator fits really nicely down the bottom, connected to the front 140mm fan, and sticks out just enough that enables me to mount a pump res combo on the back of it here. So this radiator, by the way, it's a 120mm radiator rather than 140mm. Even though this is a 140mm fan at the front, I'm actually going to get a adapter that goes from 140mm back down to 120mm to enable me to mount this with the ports at the bottom, because it's the best way that it fits in there. And 140mm radiator didn't even fit in the bottom of this case at all. So I went with 120mm, and that'll just sit in there just nicely. And what that'll enable is, it has about a centimeter gap. The adapter that I've got measures about a centimeter thick from the back of the front fan to where it mounts onto the radiator. With that there, with another fan here in pull, so I have a push-pull configuration, it moves this fan out just enough to enable me to mount one of those small little pump res combos from EK with the 120mm fan mount right here behind the gap where the power supply is, when there's nothing else here. There's no cables here, nothing else here in the case taking up that room, but it's also going to be a very short little one so that it doesn't go too high in the case to interrupt with the top sort of 3 or 4 ports, so like the AGP port and then the next 2 following PCI ports. It doesn't interfere if I want to have any long cards mounted in that system at all. It sort of comes up to about where my hand is here, which is almost the level of this, where this actual little cage is here. So that's the idea of what I'm going to do in terms of the pump. Another really interesting thing about how I'm setting this up is I want this to be very quiet, except for, unfortunately, the video card. So unlike how I did the first build, where I had the video card also water cooled, as well as the CPU, this time around I'm only going for CPU liquid cooling, because I still want the option, if I need to swap some video cards in and out, do easy maintenance and things like that, just in case I do want to just do some testing on this system with a different video card. So the idea is to keep the main portion of the hardware, like all expansion slots, free to access without anything, getting in the way, tubing or anything like that. So the idea is to use the same EK Supreme Signature Edition water block that I've got here in the original water cooling build in 2016, and just have the tubing routed in a really unique way that frees up all of the space in the system to have access to it all, to be able to swap bits and pieces in, do maintenance on the system without the water cooling getting in the way. I am going to be using flex tubing, not hardline, because while hardline looks really good in photos, looks really good when you're building permanent systems that are going to be put together, built, and then sit on a desk for 2 years without being touched. Hardline's good for that, but what it is not good for is for maintenance, flexibility, because every time you want to do something and it involves moving any part of the water cooling loop, you have to completely drain it, you have to make sure there's no leaks, put all the tubing back in place. The fittings and pipe are a little bit fragile, so if you knock something, it's very easy to knock a pipe out of the fittings that the tube go into. And to be honest, hardline just looks a little bit out of place on a retro hardware, for example. So, and I've already got most of the fittings and bits and pieces that I want anyway. So flex tubing it is. So that's part one of the video. I currently don't have a sort of date or deadline of when I want to get this system done by. Hopefully I'd like to get it finished by the end of the year. Just right now, between now and September, when my partner's and our wedding is, we're kind of a little bit preoccupied financially with that. So some of the bits and pieces I still haven't picked up yet, like the pump and reservoir combo. I haven't actually bought that just yet. But that'll be probably coming in the next couple of months. It might actually come in after the wedding, actually, so it just might depend on how things are going. So I think the next video I'm going to do is test fitting with the radiator in. I'm waiting for the adapter to actually turn up at the moment. It's still in transit. I'm going to mount the motherboard in here, put the CPU block on, mount the radiator in. I'm then going to test running where I'm going to be putting tubing and sort of talk you guys through the plan of having the tubing routed in a certain way to make this case look kind of unique. I'm not going to have just tubing going from like one part into the next part, into the next part, into the next part, like most water cooling builds, because if I did that, it's going to be all over the top of the hardware that I want to actually be able to have access to, especially the video card. So I'm planning to do a little bit of funky routing with the tubing in this to make it a little bit more of like a highlight feature in the build that's functional, so that it's not actually in the way of swapping in hardware and things like that. But kind of make it look rather unique, so there's a little bit more tubing and makes it look like a little bit more's going on in here than what actually is. So that video will be coming hopefully before we end up having our wedding in September, but it will happen probably in the next month and a half, I think, depending on when I get some other bits and pieces for it as well. But it's yeah, it'll come in the future. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. It's just sit down and talk, and I'm just sort of testing out this new style of sitting in front of the camera like this and talking to you guys about some of the builds and stuff I'm doing. I have actually got a second build on the way that I'm looking at doing as well. It's going to involve a Windows 98 PC. It's going to be a bit of an evolution of the Retro 99 build that I did. It's going to sort of evolve and do a little bit of an upgrade from that. That'll be coming in the very near future, probably in the next couple of weeks. I'm just waiting for another part for that to turn up as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.